These stories are about the way people lived long, long, long ago. In the Stone Age, in the Bronze Age, and in the Iron Age. We begin in the Stone Age, and we begin with this boy. This boy had a friend who went everywhere with him. And the friend may have looked something like this, because it was very possibly a wolf that this boy had as a friend, a bit like my friend Lupo here. Let me show you something. This, I don't know if you can see it clearly enough, but this is a picture of something found on the floor in a cave. It's a footprint here, and that's the boy's footprint. And here is something else. That's the paw print of his pet dog. Now, the dog and the boy went into this cave, and the floor was muddy. Maybe it had rained recently. And if you were to look at the prints, you would see the boy's steps going like this, and the dog, or the wolf, his paw prints going alongside. And then you can see where the dog jumped up onto something, because the prints stop, and then they come back. The boy, they know, was holding a flaming torch, a big piece of wood he may have put in a fire, so that he could see his way in the cave. And at one point he wipes this flaming torch on the wall of the cave, perhaps just to make a mark of where he is so he doesn't get lost, or maybe to clean the branch, and then they walk on. And how do they know this? Well, their footprints, as they walked across the cave, dried. And they stayed there for years and years and years. And do you know how many years ago that was? This very first example, proof that a boy and a dog were friends. 26,000 years ago. So that kind of friendship between people and animals, a boy and a girl maybe, and a dog, that's been going on for thousands of years. Now, in that cave, there weren't things that we would see today, but there were other things. And maybe about 120 years ago, there was a girl in a cave in northern Spain, I think it was, and she was there with her dad. Now, her dad was one of these amateur archaeologists who was fascinated by things from the past, and if he found something, he would look at it, think what it was, maybe check with his friends as to what it might be for and how old it was. And they were in a cave, and her father was rooting around on the floor, picking up old tools made of flint, maybe some daggers, maybe an axe, maybe a hammer, all those things that people used to use thousands of years ago. And the girl was maybe a bit bored, and she picked up a lantern, and she began to walk around the cave and look about, and then she saw them, and they were everywhere. On the walls, on the ceiling. And she said to her father, look at the animals. And they would probably be like these. Look at this. This is a real picture. This is from a real cave. Maybe in Spain, maybe in France, But can you see the lion? Can you see the antelope with their big curled horns? Can you see even a rhinoceros down here? These were painted in the caves, and the artists, for that's what they were, would have made paint or pigment out of ground stone and water, and they would have gone into the cave, not just at the front where this girl had found them, but deep, deep, a really long way into the cave tunnel, where it was so dark, and they would have taken little bowls of stone with oil and a bit of a twig in it to give it some light, and they would have gone right down into the end of the cave, and then maybe with their fingers, maybe with a stick, not quite a brush, but something like that, and they would have painted on the wall the big bisons, or the lions, or the antelopes with the huge horns, and also people, little stick people like that. And nobody really knows why they're there. This cave art is found not just in Spain and France, but all over Europe, in North America, and round the other side of the world in Australia. Here's a thing, maybe 17, 20, even possibly 60,000 years ago, people started to do this. Put their hands on a wall and make a stencil. And they used to do it by swallowing the pigment and spitting on their hands, and it sprayed all over. So you ended up with an impression. And these hands are right around the world. And we don't really know why they painted those creatures in the caves. Maybe for when they went out hunting afterwards, it would give them success and luck in the hunt. Or maybe because in the dark, deep cave, the painters got into a sort of trance, and they thought they were in the world of the spirits, and they would speak to the spirit of the lion, of the bear, of the antelope, and receive information and ideas. Who knows? But when you next pick up a paintbrush in your art class, just think that you are connected thousands of years of a connection with those first artists, and ask yourself why you are making that painting, and maybe you will discover why they made those paintings. And another thing from that long time ago, the people used to get big stones and they would put them in the ground, and they would make circles of stone, and they were big circles. I went to one called Callanish, which is on an island in the Hebrides, islands to the west of Scotland, and it was the Isle of Lewis. And the Callanish stones are tall and quite thin, and there's a large circle, and then there's some smaller stones in another circle, and I spent the night there camping. Oh, and you felt the spirits of those ancient times. Another one in a place called the Lake District, big mountains and lakes, in a huge field surrounded by hills and mountains. There's a stone circle called Castle Rig. The stones are not that big, but they're big and wide. And then, of course, perhaps the most famous one in the world, Stonehenge. Look at the size of those stones. They would have taken many people to drag them up over a piece of ground and drop them into the holes. And it took maybe 3,000 years of people building first a ring, like a ditch, and then holes, and then with wood, and then stuff. It kept going on and on and on. And we don't know why. Possibly it was a Stone Age computer to say when the full moon was coming, or the midwinter sun, or the midsummer sun would rise. We don't know. But again, you can think, you can have your ideas. And there was a book I read about 10 years ago. I read the first book and thought, wow, there's more. And I read the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books in this series, written by a lady called Michelle Paver. And I know that the first book is in your library. And she called it Wolf Brother. Let's have another look at a wolf. And she wrote this story at the end, and set it in the end of the Ice Age. And she worked very hard to get the details just right. So she travelled to places like the Arctic in Canada and watched how the Inuit went out hunting and how they lived. She went to the north of Norway and watched the Swami people, how they lived in the snow and the dark winter months. And she went to other places around the world where there are still people living in an indigenous tribal way. And she created 2 characters in the book, well 3 really. The boy was called Torak, the girl was called Ren, and you wouldn't mess with her. She was champion with a bow and arrow. And the boy has a pet called Wolf. Well, he rescues him when he's a cub from some beast which is in the forest. And he and the wolf begin to speak to each other, much like you might speak with your dog. The way the dog growls at you, looks at you. Marvellous books that take you back to those times. So that's a very quick look at the Stone Age. And next time you walk out and you see some gravel, you know those stones they put in front of houses or the side of the road or whatever, pick up some of the stones. The ones called flint, they're dark grey and they've got sharp edges. You may be holding part of a Stone Age hammer or something they chipped off one of the axes they were making. You could be in contact with that ancient history. Now the next film will be about the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, moving from stone to bronze to iron, and we'll find out what bronze is. Okay, thank you.